Welcome, everyone, to Rock M Radio. This is a brand new episode of Dive Cuts. Dive Cuts. We've been here for 7 seasons now, and of course, we're here to talk about your Missouri basketball Tigers. I am your host, Sam Snelling. If you're watching us on YouTube, there is a subscribe button down below our screen here. Please press it. Also, there's a like button. Smash that as well. If you're listening on the podcast, I hope you're subscribed there, Spotify, all that kind of stuff. With me over here on the on your right, my left is Matthew J. Harris. Matt, how are you? Happy holidays, post holidays.
Happy holidays to you. Man, I don't know how long it's been since I've been on the pod. I think it was like pre Seton Hall was the last time I was here, so it's been a hiatus, bordering on a hiatus, I should say.
Yeah, I was trying to remember because we were supposed to record last week, and I just sort of punted. There was like so much going on,
just like they did in the bowl game we all watched.
Well, yeah. So like there was so much going on with like pre-bowl game coverage. There was Mizzou was coming off a really horrible loss. We were preparing to play an opponent they should absolutely blow the doors off of. So it was like, do we really need to podcast? You know, with like the holidays and I think we sort of came to a decision that, you know what, we don't need to talk this week. Let's just take the week off. So yeah, we haven't podcasted at all since before Braggin Rights, at least we as a Dive Cuts podcast. Mm-hmm. And so yeah, I guess we probably need to rip the Band-Aid off a little bit of the Braggin Rights game. There's been some, further developments which have, maybe
don't concern us. Don't concern us.
Changed the way people have certainly looked at Illinois' hot start.
They beat the crap out of
afterwards. Terrence Shannon is. They did throttle Northwestern, but Terrence Shannon is suspended from the Illinois men's basketball program after dropping 30-something points and almost single-handedly annihilating Missouri off the floor in St. Louis because of a rape accusation. Formal charges. Yeah, like I don't want to make light of that situation. I don't want to.
Nope.
I think there's a lot of people who I've probably made jokes about the timing of it as it relates to Shannon putting the hurt on our Tigers in St. Louis. So basically, we're just going to move past that discussion. It's horrible. If it ends up like he ends up being convicted, that's awful. For
there
a lot
are
of
Illinois
reasons.
Podcasts. If you want that content, they're champagne.
But we will talk about the game a little bit. Missouri shot the ball really poorly. They did not defend the ball very well at all. The transition defense was pretty poor. And all the things that we kind of thought they might need to do in order to win the game, they didn't do. So that's how you take a 24 point loss.
24-point loss.
So 3 years in a row we've had blowouts.
At this point, I just want a competitive game.
Last year was fun, but I mean,
yeah,
maybe not all that much drama.
I don't know. It's just semi-competitive basketball games. That's what I grew up watching in this rivalry, and gave it some salience. Was 2 competent teams that had built rosters that could duel for 40 minutes and at least make you halfway interested at the under 16 timeout in the second half. We haven't had that for a while. I'd like that to resume again sometime soon. It was like, if you asked me what the worst case scenario was, I'm pretty sure the first 5 minutes of that basketball game summed it up. Missouri got open shots by guys who probably aren't the guys you want shooting them. They were jumpers. Those jumpers turn into long rebounds, which turn into Terrence Shannon steaming up the floor, which turn into you like trying to build a wall, but Terrence Shannon's already to the free throw line, so that's kind of immaterial. If you do stop him, there's some guy running to the deep corner opposite to spot up. It's just, you know, in the preseason we made light of Illinois not having a point guard. Well, you don't need one when the rebounds are letting you launch onto secondary breaks, and it's just really your best dude steaming to the rim. It was brutal, Missouri.
Well, and also your best dude, going very hard to his strong hand. Like I think, like that's one of the things that has sort of bothered me when Missouri has done some of its full court pickups, and
they don't weak a guy at all. They don't.
Yeah, they don't push him to his weak hand, and it's just like, well, like even against like Kansas, and I remember like Aiden Shaw going up to pressure KJ Adams and just letting him go right. Like, what hand do you think that guy wants to dribble with? Most bad ball handlers can pound the ball with their right hand, like if you're right-handed, right? So if you put like Connor Vanover, ask him to bring the ball up, and you let him dribble with his right hand, he'd probably be okay. I mean, as long as he's defended by like another big guy,
right?
But like that's kind of the exchange here is you're allowing guys to dribble with their dominant hand, and you're not forcing them to make any decisions. All they have to do is go forward. Yeah, that's going to end badly.
It ended badly. Missouri had a shot between like the 15-minute and the 12-minute mark where they were getting some stops, and they were getting down the floor, and then they just couldn't make shots.
Yeah, Illinois was not like on fire.
No, there was a chance for them to dig in. They got it to 14-9. I think I wrote about it. It was 17-9 actually, and I think I wrote about it in the Aiden Shaw piece a couple weeks ago. Like they're down 17-9, but they come down, they break some token pressure, they kick ahead, and it's Shaw open in the corner. And if he drives it and tries to put a foul on Coleman Hawkins, you're in that ball game. He misses a jumper. Illinois comes down, buries a three. All of a sudden it's, an 11-point ball game. You're calling timeout. You're trying to stop it. And they just could not find a way to get an extended 2 to 3 minute period of quality offense to cool Illinois down. I'm not surprised Illinois came out of the gates fast. They were embarrassed last year. I think they clearly had a little bit more of an edge going into this game. More of the guys who were in that beatdown last year were still on the roster. Mm-hmm. Like, it wasn't inconceivable that Illinois was going to come out and really roll in the first 4 minutes of that ball game.
Also, like in a reverse of last year, like, Kobe went off last year, and Kobe was on the Missouri roster for the beatdown the year before.
Yeah.
And so like the best player in the game, last year
pissed off from getting their ass kicked.
Yeah, and now it's basically Illinois' turn, and Shannon was awesome. Really terrific. Like he did everything that you kind of thought he could do, and to his credit, he got to his spots. If you want to ding Missouri, they certainly allowed him to get to his spots with not a lot of pushback.
No, but I think what we're both saying is like there was a moment maybe about 5 or 6 minutes in where Missouri could have dug its heels in, grinded out a couple of buckets, and really, calm things a little bit, and they just couldn't do it. Right. And once Illinois got that thing to 11, then push it out to 15, we've watched this team, try and save some face. They've done it, against Minnesota. They rallied back against Seton Hall, but neither of those teams are of the caliber that Illinois is and had sort of the depth, at least in the first 5, that Illinois has. And Missouri just couldn't make enough shots to sustain it enough. And, I thought they figured out some things in the second half to kind of try and, get a little bit of rhythm, but then Illinois would get right back to just pounding them and eating them alive in transition. It was just, it was pretty much an all systems kind of failure in a lot of ways there. And I just don't know what you really take out of that game outside of, to me, it's a burn the tape type of game. I don't know what you draw from that, reviewing that really heavily, other than, we were terrible, in transition defense. they got stuck over helping again. Like there were some really fundamental breakdowns that you don't need tape to address. You've coached those points long enough that I think you can, kind of expend minimal effort really just, having grisly autopsies of film. I think that was a pretty quick review there. But then they got a week off, and then they got the most get right type of situation in the world, a sub 330 team in Kim Pom, an empty gym.
Which,
Christmas week.
like this year hasn't always gone according to plan. And certainly early, Missouri wasn't putting the distance between them and Central Arkansas right away, but they did, and a nice little run there. And I think towards the end of the first half was what kind of gave them some distance. And then they just sort of doubled that distance pretty quickly at the start of the second half. And that game was, largely uncompetitive. But there were certainly things that, I think the both of us, or even the three of us, if you want to include the other co-host who shows up sometimes, Matt Watkins, and wanting to see kind of a larger role for Tamar Bates. Like you have guys who are doing really nice things on offense. That includes Sean East. It really includes Tamar Bates. And you want to see those guys take more shots. And like there have been games where Tamar Bates has barely shot the ball 5 times. And, like I realize there is always going to be a learning curve when you're kind of coming into a new system. For him, especially coming from a style of play where he was basically asked to defer in most offensive situations, to a situation right now, with Missouri having both Caleb Grill and John Tanji just not playing. Like Tamar is really the only newcomer that could offer you any kind of hope offensively.
Yeah.
So he needs to, and hopefully that's a trend. Because I think it could be.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I give them a little bit of leeway on in the UCA game was you really have to go back and look at the lineup kind of sub pattern that they were using. We've talked about, maybe they need to break up Honor and East a little bit. We've talked about it on the pod here. We've written about different ways defenses target them in switches, different kinds of switches, but they get targeted because they're smaller guards. And they can be a liability sometimes in those switch situations. So it's like, okay, do we need those two together as much? Especially when it seems like increasingly they're really overlapping each other in terms of what they're trying to do offensively. You're not getting sort of that nice diversity, in terms of skill set. Well, Missouri spent a lot more time in the first half pairing Robinson with either one of Honor or East. We've talked about, is there a need maybe to try and, see a little bit about, what maybe like a guy like Kurt Lewis could do. If you're not going to have other sources of offense, you got to be able to evaluate him. There were stretches where it was Honor, Robinson, and Lewis together. And when UCA made its push, that was the backcourt on the floor. So there were some moments I thought where Missouri was clearly trying different things with the rotation in the first half that were sort of overlapping those periods, I think, where UCA was getting some traction. And that's not a surprise to me that happened. But, you look at when UCA cut the lead down, went on an 8-2 run, this was the lineup on the floor: Honor, Robinson, Lewis, Shaw, Carter. Is that the lineup that you think is going to position you for success? Probably not, but you're getting to evaluate, Robinson alongside Honor. You're getting, a cameo for Lewis. Shaw and Carter, are, guys that I think that they want to see together in terms of the 4 and 5. They've done that in a starting lineup. So I think there were just long stretches on Saturday where they were like, oh, right, we've tried some things with our sub pattern. Let's really expand, the viewfinder here and see what we have. But when they absolutely needed to get distance, they went with guys on the floor they knew could produce for them. And that was what happened in the second half. So I'm willing to give a bit of a mulligan, given that they were trying some different things with the sub pattern and the rotation. And, giving a longer look to a guy like Lewis, who what other game are you really going to want to give a JUCO guy who's been 10th in your rotation some extended runway to show you what he has, and they did that in garbage time in the second half, midway through about the same period. So in the moment, I think it's kind of frustrating, but then when you go back and kind of look at it in hindsight and really see in aggregate the rotation and the pattern they were using, it kind of makes sense. So I think that takes a little bit of ire out of the analysis or frustration out of it, at least from my seat, but I don't know how you feel.
No, I mean, I think you knew coming off the previous 3 games that there were going to be some changes. And, like we talked about, I think before going into those games, like you had to go 1-2. And if you could find a way to go 2-1 in that 3-game stretch, then all the better. And they went 0-3, which, like you're really up against the wall. And so there's virtually no wiggle room for this team. If you have any hope whatsoever left of them playing,
it's gone. There is no flex left in the rope.
And and so I think like you and I are like you kind of look at the layout and the numbers, and we're kind of like realistically, what is this team, and what are the odds they're going to play in the NCAA tournament? And
less than 5%.
It's not great, right? So it's just like all right, you get to conference play, whatever. Like we'll see what happens, But this definitely feels more like like season 2 of Konzo and and all that, where they were decent, they were competitive for the most part. Like you kind of like before we came on equated Sean East like really having a nice year to basically being this year's Jordan Geist, and there's a lot of parallels you can draw to that for because the reality is like when you have a team that struggles to score, which Konzo's second team did, because they foresaw all this offense kind of running through Jonte Porter, and then Jonte wasn't there. And so like the same thing with this team is I feel like they foresaw their offense running a certain way, and like the 2 big cogs that they thought they were going to be able to plug in
were going to be starters.
Yeah.
They're on par. If you look at their projected their value in terms of wins, they're basically 80% of what Jonte was forecast to be. So imagine that's the situation you're in.
Yeah.
These 2 guys being out are 80% or 85% of what Jonte was going to be. And if you had told people in year 2 of Konzo that you're not going to have Jonte Porter, people would not have expected this. So I think that's the hard part here is, this team, I'll have a piece tomorrow kind of looking at what they got to do moving forward. I think we always encourage people to look afield and look at, kind of the broader picture. Most outlets have Missouri between 7th and 10th in the preseason. We had them 6th. We always seem to slot them unsurprisingly, maybe a spot higher than the consensus. But if you had said to people in the preseason that were picking the SEC, Missouri's not going to have Caleb Grill or John Tanji, where do you think they're going to finish? Most probably would have said, 10th, 11th, 12th. What are they doing? Where are they sitting right now in terms of, their analytic rankings compared to the rest of the SEC? Where are they sitting, at least right now, probably in the standings? Like, I don't think it's frustrating. That's not to discount people's frustration, with what they're seeing, that's natural, but I don't think it's surprising when you understand the circumstances around it. Now, the question for them is, and we can talk about this and use it to pivot into, what we think about the SEC as we get ready to start this week. But the one thing that's working in their favor is their schedule's not bad the first couple of weeks. There's a trip to Kentucky. That's not going to be great, or it could be ugly, but other than that, there is, the trip to Tuscaloosa. I don't think of Tuscaloosa as like a crazy intimidating environment to go into. I still think Bama struggles a little bit defensively at times,
Well, and like even a couple years ago and Zoe's worst team, like they were competitive in Tuscaloosa.
Right. So they're going to go to Texas A&M as well. Like that's not a hot house necessarily. So they're not, going into Auburn in week 1. They're not going to Fayetteville in week 2.
Mm-hmm.
Rupp is tough, but even like if you've even been to a game in Rupp, there are long stretches where Rupp is pretty placid. So like they get Georgia, South Carolina, Florida, South Carolina, in the next 21 days. Florida at home. There's a way you can get to 3 or 4 conference wins early. And now, is that going to get you on the NCAA tournament bubble? Are we going to sit here on January 27th and go, oh man, they've revived hopes? No, but if you're 4-4 or 4-3 in late January, you can at least look at, the final month and go, all right, we're back to full strength. Maybe we can make a push to get to 7th or 8th in the standings. That's not going to get us in the tournament, but it's going to get us an NIT bid. I think that's realistically what the hope is now, to stabilize enough to give yourself an opportunity to play for an NIT bid. And that's not going to sound great to some people, but I think that's just probably the most realistic outlook as you sit here on January 3rd at this point, is to play well enough to maybe keep an NIT bid on the table. That's
I did want to point out, I realize there may be some people who noticed I'm wearing like this shirt with the state of Kentucky on it, and it's blue. This is not a University of Kentucky shirt. If you can't read it, it says bourbon, y'all.
I'm surprised.
It is a Heaven Hill shirt.
It is a Heaven
for anybody
Hill shirt
that is on the Bourbon Trail at some point. You can stop by the Heaven Hill Distillery and probably pick up the same T-shirt. But yeah, it's not a Wildcat shirt. So let's kind of look ahead a little bit here. I don't really know like if there's much more we need to talk about.
No, we're going to know in the next couple of weeks.
Are there any more points? Any more points you wanted to make on them?
No, I think I'll have a piece tomorrow kind of running through it. People should read it, but I think we're going to know in the next 2 weeks what this team is. And then I think in the 3rd week of January, if things have gone sideways, we can revisit it and decide or discuss. We can't decide. We don't sit in the room and make decisions for them, but weigh the merits of, do they need to start taking a little bit more forward, thinking outlook on managing this rotation. But we'll wait. That's pessimistic to even kind of hint at right now. We'll wait and see where they are in a couple of weeks, but I think we're going to have a pretty good diagnosis of this team, in the first couple of weeks of the SEC schedule.
Well, yeah. So over the next 4 games, they are expected per Ken Pomeroy to win 2 of those games. The others are at Kentucky and at Alabama, and then another following up with another home game against Florida. I feel like you can't lose to Georgia.
Nope.
And have really, because I think at this point, like, I'm most interested to see if they can do enough to sort of stay out of playing on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Because I think if you can finish the way things have gone, 9th, or 8th, which is always possible the way that things happen in the SEC. You make your home palace a really difficult place to play in, and then you win a couple you're not supposed to on the road. And certainly Missouri has been in worse road environments, and they beat Minnesota on the road. Granted, Minnesota's they're at 83rd in Ken Palm. That's not horrible. But so those are the kinds of road environments, you're not going to be overly intimidated by if you've already, played pretty well, at a place like Fog Allen. Like I don't think there's any place, outside of maybe Fayetteville, Auburn, like you mentioned, that are as intimidating as playing in Fog Allen. And Missouri really played pretty well there. So, I think you have to feel confident that you can go to, you can go to Ole Miss. You can certainly go to Vanderbilt. You can go to, and I think your point, like I've always felt like Kentucky had a very kind of like pro like
it is
atmosphere, like a regular season NBA basketball game. Like you go and it's the home team goes on a run, the crowd will kind of get revved up. But for the most part, like majority of the noise that you get is from, the in-house DJ or, whatever promotions they're running.
Yeah.
I know, like you and I both watch League Pass, so we see the League Pass in between action things that happen.
The commercials, man. It's better than the
commercials. It's wild. Sometimes they do some really funny stuff, but like the majority of it is manufactured. And I feel like Rupp is like that a lot. So I feel like you can go in there. Kentucky is a young team. They have been very up and down. Cal's teams have been. Although I will say, like I think Kentucky's had some really nice moments this year, but they've typically been stronger the longer the year goes on.
Yeah.
And so like I kind of feel like that's an opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, South Carolina was bad and walked in there and got a win last year. Vanderbilt went in and got a win last year. I mean, it's not inconceivable given how that roster set up that maybe you catch them on a bad day. UNC Wilmington went and got a win this year. So it's not unheard of. I think the bigger game for me is that Florida game in Columbia on January 20. That is still a 40%, expected win probability for Missouri. It's always floated between 40 and 52%. Like that's always sort of settled in that toss-up range. That's the kind of game that if you want to try and assure yourself of getting to 8th or 9th, you need to pick off that game at home. Those are the kinds of games that I think you look at and say, okay, we can get a pickup opportunity here. Maybe Caleb Grill is close to coming back. Tamar Bates has started to play with a little bit more juice. You're getting some confidence there, and you're able to find a way to get a win there. To me, I think the biggest thing you've got to look at is they are 92nd in KenPom as of today, Wednesday, January 3rd. These are the teams in front of them immediately. South Carolina is 9th in the SEC at 60th in KenPom. It's not egregious. Ole Miss is in front of them at 80th. Georgia's in front of them at 86th. LSU is behind them at 104th, and then Vandy is 209th. Missouri plays 7 games against those 5 teams. If you want to get to 8th or 9th, you probably need to go 5-2 in those games. Like you got to win your home games. You probably got to steal road wins at LSU and Vandy to feel good about getting out of the bottom, because I think usually teams that finish the play on Wednesday have 6 or 7 wins is usually the cutoff. If you can get 5 wins against teams around you in the bottom of the standings, you should be able to steal 2 or 3 somewhere else to get out of Wednesday. So like we say every year, everyone looks at who you got to beat in front of you. A lot of what the SEC comes down to is, do you handle business at home, and do you beat teams that you should beat that are behind you in the standings? It's, that's not revolutionary to say, it's not crazy, but that's really a lot of what success in this league is, or at least getting to the middle of the pack, is just handling your business, protecting your home floor, beating weaker teams on their home floor. Like that's really all it is.
We can almost call it the Mark Stoops rule.
Yeah.
Like Kentucky football always beats teams that are worse than them, never beats teams that are better than them. And so like they're always pretty good every year. They're pretty good. And I think like you're always going to take an unexpected loss. No team is kind of immune from an unexpected loss. At least, there's always every other year or something like that. There's always a team that kind of goes on a big run and they only get taken down by, somebody really good on the road. But there's usually a lot of, like middle of the pack. The difference between playing, being the top seed on Wednesday and being the 4 seed, was like 4 results last year. So, and if you're kind of looking at it from that perspective, it's like, okay, like these are the games that if you can snip off a game and beat a 1 or a 2 seed, hey, great, like let's take that. But Missouri didn't really do that last year. They beat Tennessee on the road. Tennessee
they picked off Kentucky at home. Like they got Kentucky early and at home. Missouri got them. So like those were really the 2 games they flipped if you look at it. And
then everything else, like they got swept by Texas A&M. You lost at Arkansas, won at home against Arkansas,
split with Mississippi State.
So like it's funny how like you make it, or we're making it sound kind of unexciting, but you're going to play 18 basketball games against all these teams. These are teams and coaches that you face every year. Everybody knows everybody. And so like even going on the road and playing at Vanderbilt is difficult because that's a good coaching staff. They're having a tough year. So yes, you should win. But even if you do win, it's probably going to be a close game. Like if you can get out of there with like a 74-68 kind of win, hey, great, it's a dub. Let's get out of here.
Yeah.
And I think like when you talk about winning on the road, especially in league play, you have to be able to be really, really happy with any kind of win, and then try to win as many as at home. And I think like that's basically, Missouri is in a situation this year where the expectations are middling enough. Like I still think there's a lot of fans who think like, they can maybe exceed expectations and challenge, but for the most part, we're all just like, look, this is looking like it's at best an NIT season. And even if they don't kind of make it there, like I still think like you can get a lot of progress made this season with a lot of the guys that they have on the roster that you're wanting to bring back. And so like, how do we approach this, this season? Well, it's like you're saying, like we've got a really important, probably 2 or 3 week period where you start to kind of learn, like you can't kind of come out of this like 2-6.
Nope. Like the way I would I ignore, and that'll sound weird, I ignore, the results of like going to Rupp, going to T-Town. Like to me, the games I put a lot of stock in are Georgia, the 2 South Carolina games, the trip to Vanderbilt, and Arkansas at home. Those are all teams sitting lower than 58th in KenPom. And the Arkansas game is at home. There's a world where you could be 5-4 leaving Nashville on February 3rd. Now that's not going to get people excited, but you look at the home stretch, you have a trip to Ole Miss, who's 80th. You get Mississippi at home again, and you get LSU again. There's a way in which if you're 5-4, you can start to think, okay, we're at least, if we just are competent down the stretch, we're not going to wind up in that, playing on Wednesday. We're going to be able to keep our guys competitive enough and focused enough playing for the postseason for an NIT bid. And we can still kind of integrate our young guys and a guy like Tamar Bates, who we want to keep around, in such a way that, we're able to develop them. Like that to me is where I think you want to be. If anything more than that is awesome. And if, say they start 7-2 and we have to talk about them suddenly reviving their bubble opportunity, I'm not going to be like, oh darn, we have to reassess. But if they're 5-4, or maybe even like 4-5 on February 3rd, I think you can at least say, okay, they're tracking towards avoiding Wednesday. They're tracking towards the NIT. They can still, have some vets engaged for getting one last postseason trip. They can still give these young guys some meaningful games with some stakes behind it. I think it's like you're saying, you don't want to go 2-7 though, and just have everybody going, crap, we got 4 more weeks of this. Yeah. Like, I just think, we talk about culture and, what it means to have a program, that's healthy, making it so that you have some stakes, even if they're not the ones you maybe dreamt about in October are there, but at least having something tangible, something out there in front of you that can keep guys engaged, focused, bought in, that matters. And so I think that's what the next couple of weeks are about here is, can they play well enough to keep some stakes involved here for them outside of just playing for pride and outside of the staff just feeling like, okay, we've really got to preserve a good environment for our young guys to feel like they're still getting some development, because we're going to start seeing young guys hitting walls probably in about 4 or 5 weeks. So it's kind of a weird tenuous balance here. So I know what we're talking about is probably not exciting to some people. It's probably a downer for some folks who, in a season where people I think are already kind of a little bit deflated, but that's the reality. And I think, it's better to start there than sort of just say, well, maybe there's a way they can thread the needle. I think being really sort of honest on the front end here is probably the best way to keep things healthy for this, the guys that you're watching and for your own sanity.
Well, so did you know that the Georgia Bulldogs have the nation's 7th longest active win streak? They have won 8 games in a row. They started 2-3 with losses to Oregon, Miami of Florida, and Providence. They beat Wake Forest and North Carolina Central. And the schedule hasn't been cupcakey. But I also find it interesting that they entered the game against Winthrop, which was their 6th game of the year, 85th in KenPom. That was the first win of their current 8-game winning streak, and they are now 86th in KenPom. So I think you could say that they have basically played and beaten the teams that they were supposed to beat. Based upon what KenPom sort of thinks that this team is and will be. They're 86th currently. They are projected 3-point loss to Missouri on Saturday.
Yeah, their best win in that run, quite honestly, might be coming back against High Point. High Point's looking like a team that's going to be a pretty feisty mid-major. Florida State is clearly stuck in a lull. Georgia Tech's going through year 1 of a rebuild under Damon Stoudemire. Winthrop is a team that can be pretty feisty in the early. I think they're still in the Big South, but not the same as they were when Pat Kelsey was there a couple of years ago. So yeah, not Mercer, but High Point's looking like a pretty feisty little group. And, they trailed for long stretches of that game. I think they were down midway through the second half. I watched part of that game, and they fought back, and they got a good quality win there. I think
I've
Georgia's
only seen them play. I think I've watched about half of one half against Oregon, a little bit of the Florida State game, and then I did tune in for a little bit of the Providence game.
They were good against Wake. That they fought back. I think they were down by 8 or 9 against Wake and fought back and got a good win. Miami was a buzzsaw in the Bahamas at Baha Mar. Providence was closer than I think people expected. Providence got some separation late, I think. But this is a group, we love to make light of Mike White. I don't think we'll ever tire of making light of Mike White. That's part of our gag here, if we have any of them, part of our shtick. But if you said to me, they're going to go 17, 14, 7, 11 in year 2, I'd say that I can't mock that. Like, they're doing what they need to do. They're trying to establish some competence. They've got a freshman in Silas DeMary who's.
I would also like to say for the record, I don't think any of us think that Mike White is a bad basketball coach.
We just don't think that he's going to be a future elite, a guy that.
Yeah, he's a good basketball coach. He's just not. At least he's not proven that he's an elite basketball coach.
Correct. But, they're getting, Silas DeMary. He's not been the most efficient guy, but they're getting a freshman who they're going to need in future years a lot of minutes. They're getting, a guy like Blue Kane kind of integrated a little bit, who they're going to need in future years. Dylan James, not so much, but, they've managed, I think, for them to find a balance between like a guy like RJ Melendez getting a reboot, a guy like Noah Thomason, who was a solid low major player coming in and being a regular contributor for him. I think they're doing what they needed to do, which was elevate the level of competence a little bit. They've got Asen Newell coming next year, who's going to be a big, big piece for them. If Mike White can put together, another solid recruiting class and maybe a little help from the portal, they could be kind of sneaky next year. I think what'll be interesting for them right now is, their defense is clearly ahead of their offense. I would say, from having watched them, I think they guard at a high enough level that they can give Missouri some fits. Missouri's not operating at a really consistent level. I'm not sure Georgia is. I think it's going to be the team that can get the most traction offensively. I think the best player on the floor will probably be Sean East. And to your point earlier, this would be a great game for Tamar Bates to really show that he's putting together a run of good games for them. Noah Carter looked like he was, figuring a few things out. He's still not shooting the ball really well from the perimeter, but if he can start to put some things together, I think Missouri's got enough that it can stitch together more offense than Georgia, and it can get a home win. But that's, I don't feel confident enough, given what we've seen from this offense so far, to feel like I would say this is more than a toss-up for them. But it's one they had to find a way to keep in their column.
And Noah Carter's still rebounding really well.
Yep.
For all of his struggle shooting the ball. He's still got a 22% defensive rebound rate, which that is nationally ranked. And it does seem like he's often getting a good collection of rebounds, regardless of how many minutes he's playing. Hey, Missouri's up to 91st in KenPom. As we live and breathe right here.
One
celebrate.
This is how the resurrection begins. The stone is being rolled away. It's happening right now. I was going to ask, what's sort of your temperature check here? I know we talked before about this team and sort of, how we're just feeling, I think, in macro, but I'm just sort of curious, what your thoughts are at this point. We're into non-con. I sort of think they're doing what they're doing under the circumstances, but I didn't know how you're sort of feeling writ large.
I feel like writing Study Hall after every game, and for several of the games, I've given myself a little bit more runway to before needing to publish. Part of that has been aided by the fact that Missouri football has been doing good things, and so there hasn't been as much attention on hoops, which I think keeps people generally happier. And it keeps me happier. I like it when Mizzou football is good. I like it when Mizzou basketball is good. And Mizzou basketball isn't bad. I think we're all a little bit disappointed by how the start of the season's gone, but I really kind of feel like what happened last year is really rare.
Yeah.
And there's a whole lot of people out there that get the impression that you can come in, you can go into the portal, and you can
solve
fix
everything.
And for the most part, every new hire that was put into place last year struggled, except for a few. And the few were right. Like the few were talked about a lot. Jerome Tang obviously was another one. Dennis Gates, and I think like what I'm really hoping that this does. I'm really hoping that it changes our approach to how we view the portal. And I think, we kind of discussed this a little bit before we came on, but I've always sort of felt that when utilized appropriately, the portal can be a really great tool, and it should be used sparingly. If you're building your program right, and you are building through high school recruiting, and this really goes for college football too. Like I think the Ole Miss experiment for what they're doing. I don't know how much you pay attention to the college football portal. Sometimes it's hard to miss. I know that you do follow enough people on Twitter to kind of catch wind, but that experiment is really, really interesting to me because this is the first time that you've seen a team basically just go all in on a lot of high-end talent. And they're bringing in a lot of talented guys to play defense, mostly defense. Like he's really trying to fix the defense. Offensively, they were fine. And so like next year, we're going to find out if that works. I would rather be in the situation that Eli Drinkwitz is in. I realize this is a basketball podcast, but I know a lot of our fans pay attention to both.
Yeah.
Where Drink is only needing certain positions in the portal.
Yeah.
And he's attacking those positions. And to the point where, like, I don't know how much weight you give to On3's transfer portal rankings, but Missouri has the highest, like, per player ranking, like, based on, like, because they're not taking 25 guys. They've got, what, 6, 7? But those guys on a individual basis are ranked higher than even Ole Miss. Which I think that's, we've talked about this a lot with basketball, is like, that's where the value is. I love what Missouri has done with their prep recruiting.
It's been awesome.
And yeah, going back to basketball now, I really, really, really like getting young players you believe in. I really like this 2023 class. Really excited to see what the 2024 class, can do. And then, you already have like a borderline 4 or 5-star kid, and Aaron Rowe signed up for 2025. If you keep doing that, then the type of things that you should be doing in the transfer portal, you shouldn't be coming in, with guys who you expect to take over all these possessions. You want to fix here, you want a patch there, but the biggest key why Missouri was good last year was Kobe Brown,
who started developing under the previous guy that everyone maligned.
Right. Like the one thing, like, we all knew, Kobe's junior year, we all knew that he could pass, he could dribble, he couldn't shoot. It didn't make sense why he couldn't shoot. He was a good free throw shooter. He was a good mid-range shooter. He just never made threes. I don't want to say never. We'll give him his 28% credit.
Yeah.
But the real reason why Missouri was so good last year is Kobe Brown. Like, Kobe Brown went from a guy who was a really good college basketball player to a first-round NBA draft pick. And so that development started early and continued on. Dennis Gates kind of capped it off. And that, coupled with, being able to put a really good shooter. I don't think
who developed, who Dennis Gates took from JUCO and developed.
Yeah, like Dennis Gates had, for 3 years, and Nick Honor being a point guard who was not going to turn the ball over. They didn't get everybody that they wanted out of the portal, but they had a low turnover rate. They shot a high volume of threes, and they made a high volume of threes, a high percentage of threes on that volume. When you sort of blend all that together, it makes sense why they had a good year. So, kind of going back to your original point, I'll stop talking here in a second. I'll let you finish off if you want. I really think that regardless of what happens the rest of the year, they need to really, really buy in with what they've already got on the roster and what's coming in.
Yeah. I'd make this point. Jerome Tang's crew started the year at 25th in KenPom. They're currently 74th. Mizzou and Kansas State, the two darlings with first-year head coaches, have sank about the same number of places in KenPom over the non-conference play. They've both taken losses by, 2 double-digit losses to teams that are probably going to contend for the NCAA tournament beyond the bubble, and they have a close loss, by less than single digits. So, like, their profiles, K-State started higher, and they've played a little bit better. But you can see it
does help being in the Big 12, by the way.
It does help being in the Big 12. But, like, Kansas doesn't have, Naquan Tomlin. Missouri's never had John Tonji. They've had injury issues at certain times with K-State. Missouri's had injury issues. Like, I think you can see a lot of parallels between those two coaches and what they've had to do in year 2. And the question again is going to be, do you believe that Jerome Tang can recruit enough quality guys in the high school ranks to build a long-term stable core? Because that's what Baylor did. Baylor went to the transfer portal, but Baylor would go take developmental dudes out of the transfer portal and plug them in. It's realistically right now, I think I'll even look up Xavier. Xavier has, I think, sitting at 43rd right now. So Xavier's stabilized a little bit. They're 7-6, but again, they're playing in the Big East. But Xavier has lost to number 2 Purdue, number 48 Wisconsin, number 136 Oakland, number 1 Houston, number 140 Delaware, number 42 St. John's. They are 7-6 right now, and probably toward the back end of the bubble. And they were a team that, again, kind of tried to go to Europe, try to go to the portal, and try to do some things really quickly. Arkansas is a team that's dropped 40 or 50 spots in KenPom, and Muss is supposedly the master of the portal. But I think even seeing Muss struggle tells you that there is high variance with that strategy. And moving into the spring, I think what we're going to see is, and what's going to be interesting to monitor is, what types of guys are they targeting in the portal? Like, they need to get older. I agree with that. I don't think you can go in with 9 underclassmen as part of your core. I think you do need some seasoning there. Tamar Bates can't be the only vet with real experience, but are you going to get, a point guard that can, be a backstop for Ant Robinson as he starts and takes on his first season as the main guy? Are you going to get a 4-man, who is really in there to help you just be a connector on offense? If he's a guy who's only getting 15 to 18% usage and is cool with that, but can run your stuff, can run your Princeton-based stuff, get the ball where it needs to go, move it, set guys up. Are you finding that guy, or are you trying to go find a guy that you could see a similar image to Kobe Brown? Are you getting a wing that's a floor spacer that can come in and knock down shots, keep the flow open so your young guys can have some operating room? Or are you looking for a bucket getter? Like, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what they do. Are they looking to go get guys that can fill in and play very specific roles and can help this, young group sort of, make some really suitable progress, and make a tournament, as opposed to, we're going to get 3 dudes who are going to be our key cogs and, tell the freshmen, hey, we know we recruited you on this idea that you're going to come in and, maybe have some room to grow. No, we've changed that. I think that's going to be the thing that we sort of monitor going into the spring as well, is how much do they start relying on the 23 guys, and then who do they target in the portal? I think that's really interesting. To me, we'll talk about the postseason if they play well enough to position themselves for it. I think what you could start to see that's going to be worth monitoring, it's not as exciting, is how do they start positioning some of these guys that have shown flashes that have long-term upside? How do they start positioning them to become a core that we look at in like 25 or 26 and go, this is a team that has Final Four aspirations? This is when you start making developmental decisions around that, and that's no less important than, whether or not you can put yourself on the bubble or what your seating position is. I think there's still some long-term things that are going to give us, some that should keep your interest and keep your eye on how this team performs down the stretch.
Yeah, like I think, if the goal is to be always an NCAA tournament team, or at least in the conversation for an NCAA tournament team, or to be the kind of team and program that builds towards competing for national championships, or just national championship, a Final Four appearance. I mean, we're Mizzou fans, so we're like, I would love to see a Final Four.
Yeah.
Like, could we just start there?
Yeah.
And I think, so I think like you're right that and we'll analyze it as it comes, but like the games here the rest of the way are worth monitoring for kind of, what this individual team can do and what the second season of Dennis Gates era is going to mean. But I think hopefully what you're really hoping for is that, like 2-3 years down the road, we're looking at, this current spring as kind of being the linchpin for why the team has gotten to the stage it is because they were able to develop that core. They were able to, sustain. I think sustain is probably the right word, to sustain the environment that I feel like they've built around the program. So yeah, I'd like to see them stay out of the Wednesday play-in game. Like what happens postseason. I'd like to see this team be competitive kind of the rest of the way out.
Yeah. If they could get to 8-10, 9-9, I'd feel like under the circumstances of what happened to them with Grill going down and Tanji, not being the kind of presence that we thought he would be, that just hitting the preseason expectations under those constraints would qualify as a success. And every year at the Final Four, you read sort of these long takeout pieces, about how this veteran core, what really defined them was, they were young guys and they came in and they struggled and they took lumps and they were able to figure out what a winning attitude meant, what it meant to really, struggle, and what it, for guys that have been mostly successful, for them to actually look failure in the face and decide we're going to, be better from this. I think the hard part here is the reason why we've talked about it is I think a lot of people have thought the portal could be a way to sort of avoid doing the really hard things. And that's not to say the portal's immaterial and it's unimportant, but
it's fascinating.
It's fascinating and it's exciting and it's waiver wire stuff. But like I said before we came on, go look at this number for teams that make the Elite Eight, the Final Four, and play for national titles. Go to their KenPom page, scroll down to the bottom, and look at their continuity ranking. They're usually inside the top 120, top 100. It's not just that they recruited well. It's not just that they get good dudes. They build long-term, sustainable cores where guys know who they are. They have an identity. And that has remained the same. Continuity overall has dipped across the sport, but go look at teams that make deep runs in March. It's still a factor. It's still there. The team you see that second weekend that's getting ready for something exciting, that's getting ready to make that push, they've probably got 5 or 6 guys that have been together for a while, and they've just made smart additions out of the portal. That's where I think Missouri can get to. They've started to acquire the pieces through prep recruiting to build that core. They've just got to stay patient long enough, and we've got to stay patient long enough to see what they do with that. If it's year 4 and it's still a team that's doing what it's doing now and they've landed some top talent, then I think you ask really hard questions and you can start to be frustrated. But right now, I think they gave us a really, really nice serotonin level in year 1. But now I think they're doing the hard work. And now we've just got to see if they can finish it off and put together the right pieces to get Missouri to where we think it can be. But that there's still some stakes attached to this, even if in the near term they might not seem all that tangible to us. But that's all I got.
Well, that's all we both have. We did go a little long, but I think anytime you get Harris and myself talking about existential program questions, it's always going to go a little longer. I really didn't even intend to like veer off into that direction, because I know that your question originally was just about this team, but yeah, it's hard to talk about any one team without talking about, the bigger, picture. So we are going to dip out. We are kind of getting into the meat of the season. We are going to try to move back to our regular schedule of kind of going on Monday nights. We'll probably, spot in a live show here and there. I just threw up a link for 573tees.com. We still have t-shirts over there if you want to get them. There's a new one, a newish one over there for the Cotton Bowl that Levi worked really hard on. So head over there, click on that link and buy the t-shirts. All the money that we get is going to NIL after we recover a few costs. But that's it. We're out of here. We'll be back next Monday. I don't know if it'll be this dude or the other Matt, but we'll have a Matt talking to a Sam, and we'll talk about what happened with Georgia. So until then, thanks everybody for tuning in, and we will be back with more Rock M Radio.
Thank you everyone for tuning into Rock M Radio, a proud partner of Fans First Sports Network. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to see more just like it beamed directly into your personal device, just click the subscribe button below. And you can find this podcast through the Apple Podcast app or for iPhone, or the Google Podcast app for Android, or whatever app you use to listen to your podcast. We are also available on Spotify. Just search for Rock M Radio. And if you like other sports, Fans First Sports Network is a podcast network that has coverage of all other teams, Major League Baseball, MLS, NFL, whatever you want to listen and read about. It is a great network full of really fantastic podcasts. So look them up and subscribe to any and all of those podcasts. Rock M Radio will be back with more episodes coming soon. Thanks.